Few novels of the 20th century have provoked as much moral outrage, critical acclaim, and analytical fascination as Vladimir Nabokov's Lolita. First published in 1955, Nabokov's prose dazzles and seduces, even as his subject matter unsettles and repels, immersing readers in a world where language becomes both a lure and a weapon. While Nabokov famously claimed the novel carried no moral message, Lolita is steeped in moral ambiguity, manipulation, and the monstrous elegance of obsession. To read it is to enter a literary labyrinth, one that serves as both a story and a mirror, reflecting the complexities of art, morality, and the very act of reading itself. Nabokov was born in 1899 in St. Petersburg to an aristocratic intellectual family, an upbringing that deeply informed his later literary focus on loss, identity, and memory. The Russian Revolution forced Nabokov into exile, a formative experience that shaped his lifelong preoccupation with nostalgia and displacement. After studying at Cambridge, he lived throughout Europe before fleeing Nazi-occupied France for the United States in 1940. Nabokov was not only a novelist, but also a renowned lepidopterist, butterfly expert, and literary scholar, with a profound knowledge of European literature, particularly Pushkin, Flaubert, and Joyce. This erudition is evident in Lolita, which merges formal sophistication with a story of moral transgression. He began writing Lolita while teaching at Cornell University, drawing on his outsider's perspective to satirize 1950s America, a society marked by rising consumerism, expanding suburbia, and shifting sexual norms. Nabokov's dual role as both insider and outsider allowed him to explore the clash between European aestheticism and American vulgarity. Completed in 1953 and published in 1955 after facing numerous rejections due to its controversial subject matter, Lolita arrived in the wake of World War II, a period defined by American affluence and strict sexual mores. His experience as an émigré, shaped by the upheavals of the Russian Revolution and the war, gave him a unique vantage point on American life, which he depicted with meticulous detail and biting satire. The novel's candid treatment of taboo subjects and its masterful use of unreliable narration challenge readers to question every assertion, making it as much a novel about language, art, and deception as about its scandalous plot. Nabokov famously rejected Freudian interpretations of his work, yet he deliberately infused Lolita with psychoanalytic imagery and symbolic ambiguity, inviting readers and critics to grapple with the text's complexity. As Alfred Appel Jr. observed, Lolita is ultimately a novel about the seductive power of language and the dangers of artistic manipulation, rather than simply a story of sexual obsession. The novel begins with a faux legal introduction. Humbert is awaiting trial for murder and penning a confession. He claims to have loved only one, Dolores Hayes, young American girl he nicknames Lolita. To be near her, Humbert marries her mother, Charlotte. After Charlotte discovers Humbert's obsession and dies in a car accident, Humbert assumes custody of Lolita, telling her that her mother is ill before taking her on a cross-country journey. What follows is a harrowing tale of Humbert frames their relationship as mutual desire, but his narrative is riddled with self-justification and unreliability. Lolita, rarely given her own voice, is depicted as both a victim and, through Humbert's eyes, a seductress, a claim the narrative itself often undermines. As they travel, Humbert becomes increasingly possessive and paranoid, using threats and emotional manipulation to control Lolita, who in turn learns to navigate his demands for her own survival. Eventually, their relationship deteriorates. Lolita attempts to reclaim her agency, and after a period of secrecy and tension, she escapes Humbert's grasp. When Humbert finds her again, she is married, pregnant, and no longer under his control. Devastated by the loss of possession rather than guilt, Humbert murders his rival, Claire Quilty, another predator who had exploited Lolita. The novel concludes with Humbert's arrest and his chilling final words, "Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul." The novel is both a disturbing exploration of obsession and a masterful literary performance, forcing readers to confront the complexities of desire, manipulation, and the consequences of unchecked power. At the heart of Lolita is Humbert's pathological obsession with Dolores Hayes. This is not love, but a consuming need for control and possession. Humbert's fixation is both psychological and linguistic. He tries to define and possess Dolores not only physically, but through language, shaping her reality with his prose. As Alfred Appel Jr. notes, Humbert's descriptions are narcissistic projections of his own fantasies. He sees Lolita as an object, a symbol of lost innocence and sexualized nostalgia, never as a real person. The phrase, "my Lolita," underscores his sense of ownership, while his obsession is a demon within me that he both romanticizes and laments. Despite Humbert's florid narration, the novel is unequivocally about the abuse of a child. Nabokov's genius lies in dramatizing how language can obscure truth and manipulate perception. The tension in the novel arises from the reader's awareness of Humbert's lies and the silencing of Lolita's voice. When Dolores cries and resists, we glimpse the real girl behind the nymphet fantasy. Humbert sees these as inconveniences to his narrative. I was not even her first lover. His minimizations are horrifying and deliberate on Nabokov's part. The tragedy is that the reader must work to rescue Lolita's reality from Humbert's seductive language. As Christina Walter writes in Modern Fiction Studies, Nabokov's project is to teach the reader to distrust eloquence when it disguises predation. The tension lies in our awareness of Humbert's lies and Lolita's silenced voice. Nabokov's most subversive move is making Humbert the narrator. He is literature's quintessential unreliable narrator. Like the narrators of Poe's or Dostoevsky's confessional works, Humbert's eloquence, charm, and self-pity are tools of distortion. He flatters the reader, anticipates criticism, and cloaks his guilt in performative remorse. As Brian Boyd observes in Vladimir Nabokov, The American Years, Humbert's narration is a parody of romantic confession, warped by self-pity and aesthetic arrogance. The result is a masterclass in unreliable narration, forcing readers to question every assertion and read against the grain. You can always count on a murderer for a fancy prose style. This line is Nabokov's scalpel, dissecting the dangers of rhetorical beauty and the seductive power of art to excuse evil. The novel is also a biting satire of post-war American culture. The landscape of motels, highways, and kitsch consumerism forms both backdrop and symbol, a world of surfaces, distractions, and commodified experience. Humbert mocks the cultural kitsch he swims in, yet he is fully immersed. Dolores, as a suburban teen, is obsessed with movie stars and pop culture. Her world is commodified, and she herself becomes a product, both of American society and Humbert's gaze. This critique of consumerism parallels Humbert's consumption of her, what scholar Susan Sweeney calls the commodification of innocence. Humbert's status as an émigré adds irony and alienation, echoing Nabokov's own outsider perspective. Like many Nabokov protagonists, Penin, The Gift, Speak, Memory, Humbert is an exile, culturally, morally, and temporally. His obsession with nymphets is a grotesque attempt to recapture a lost moment with his childhood love, Annabel Lee. The past becomes pathological and the road trip becomes a failed escape from time. Humbert's memoir, with its retrospective, defensive, and lyrical form, mirrors his psychological exile. He is always pursuing Dolores, never truly with her. As critic Michael Wood puts it, Humbert pursues a ghost of his own making. Nabokov's prose is famously ornate, playful, and elusive, saturated with wordplay, puns, and literary references. This linguistic virtuosity is enchanting but also disturbing, echoing the novel's central concern. The power of art to enchant, deceive, and even justify evil. The novel is riddled with metafictional elements and riddles, inviting multiple interpretations and resisting closure. Even the names in Lolita tell a story. Her real name is Dolores Hayes, and Dolores literally means sorrow. Lo is the nickname, soft and innocent, the way a child might be called by someone close. But Lolita, that's Humbert's invention. It's not a name, it's a fantasy, a persona he creates to justify what he's doing. And that, right there, is one of the novel's most haunting themes, how the real girl gets erased beneath the weight of someone else's obsession. The road trip across America might seem like freedom on the surface, the open road, the vast landscapes, but really it's just a way for Humbert to stay mobile, unaccountable. Every motel they stop at is like a mile marker in his descent. It's not an adventure, it's a slow-motion abduction. And then there are the butterflies. Nabokov was a lepidopterist. He studied butterflies professionally, and he weaves that imagery into the novel. Butterflies are beautiful, fragile, and, crucially, things we pin down, things we collect. That's how Humbert sees Lolita, something exquisite to trap and preserve, not someone with a will of her own. Mirrors and doubles come up often too. They're everywhere. A constant reminder of how blurred identity becomes in this book. What's real? What's reflected? What's invented? Claire Quilty, Humbert's rival, is almost like his shadow self. He's another predator, but without the flowery language. No illusions, no poetry. Just vice, plain and unapologetic. And that's the scary part. Humbert isn't some one-of-a-kind monster. He's just the one telling the story. Speaking of stories, Charlotte's diary is such a brilliant symbol. Humbert uses it to spy on her, to manipulate her. And later, he does the same thing to all of us. His entire memoir becomes a kind of diary, the only version of events we're allowed to see. We never get Dolores's voice, we only get his. And finally, there's the landscape itself. That surreal, hyper-real version of America. The signs, the gas stations, the motels, it's more than just setting. It reflects Humbert's mind, unstable, strange, dreamlike. It's a dislocated world, just like the emotional reality he creates for Lolita. Humbert is one of literature's most complex anti-heroes, an aesthete whose eloquence, marked by wit, self-awareness, and literary illusion, masks the horror of his predatory acts. He is paradoxically both confessional and evasive, his narrative blending tragic romanticism with chilling manipulation. As Nabokov himself noted, Humbert is a vain and cruel wretch who manages to appear touching. His references to Poe, Dante, and Shelley are not mere flourishes. They serve to frame his crime as art, disguising evil in beauty. Critic Brian Boyd argues Humbert is a study in solipsism. He cannot imagine that other people are real. This includes Dolores, who becomes a projection, not a person. Even Humbert's remorse is tainted by narcissism, and his final vision of Lolita is an idealized fantasy rather than an acknowledgement of her reality. Nabokov resists reducing Humbert to a psychological case study, instead using him as a prism to explore the darkest recesses of human nature. Dolores is the novel's most tragic figure, and her greatest tragedy is how often she is forgotten in her own story. While Humbert tries to cast her as a temptress, Nabokov subtly restores her humanity through glimpses of her pain, humour, and resilience. Dolores is not Lolita, a name and persona imposed by Humbert, but a real girl with agency, interests, and suffering. Her limited moments of resistance, like running away and asserting her autonomy, hint at a rich inner life drowned in Humbert's voice. In feminist readings, such as those by Elizabeth Patnaud, Dolores is emblematic of the girl silenced by both patriarchal narratives and aesthetic idealization. She is murdered not once, but twice, first by Humbert, and again by the culture that sees her as his accomplice. The true tragedy is not only Humbert's crime, but the world's willingness to see Dolores only through his eyes. Charlotte, Lolita's mother, is both comic and pitiable, lonely, socially ambitious, and ultimately expendable in Humbert's scheme. Often dismissed as gullible, she is in fact a tragic figure whose vulnerability makes her an easy target. Her diary, which he reads and mocks, is a parallel to his memoir, but hers is honest, vulnerable, and ultimately fatal. Claire Quilty serves as Humbert's grotesque double, similarly obsessed with Dolores but devoid of Humbert's self-deluding romanticism. He is Humbert's shadow, exposing the full depravity of their shared obsession. Quilty's presence in the narrative shatters any temptation to romanticize Humbert, and Humbert's murder of Quilty is framed as a final, perverse delusion of chivalry rather than justice. Nabokov's prose is lush, ornate, and self-consciously literary, an exercise in linguistic seduction that dazzles and unsettles in equal measure. As scholar Michael Wood notes, Lolita is about the danger of beautiful language. The novel is structured as a faux confession, complete with a foreword and afterword, blurring the line between fiction and reality and inviting readers to question the very nature of storytelling. At the heart of the novel is Humbert, an unreliable narrator who manipulates both his narrative and the reader's sympathies. He confesses and deceives in equal measure, appealing for understanding while obscuring uncomfortable truths. Nabokov's use of irony and subtle narrative contradictions continually undercuts Humbert's self-image. What Humbert frames as romance, the reader experiences as horror. The novel is rich with allusions, from Poe's Annabel Lee to Dante's Beatrice, not to elevate Humbert's feelings, but to critique their false grandeur. Nabokov's imagery, sunlight glinting on skin, the sound of tennis shoes on gravel, endless roads and mirrors, reflects Humbert's distorted vision, creating a vivid, sensual atmosphere that heightens the sense of unease. Like Pale Fire, another Nabokov novel featuring a delusional narrator, Lolita traps the reader inside a mind they cannot trust, exposing both the narrator's fragility and the seductive power of storytelling itself. Upon publication, Lolita ignited immediate controversy, leading to bans in France, Argentina, and New Zealand. The novel was condemned by some as pornography, while others, including Graham Greene, hailed it as a literary triumph. The heart of the debate lies in Nabokov's seductive prose, which blurs readers' moral judgment through its beauty and sophistication. Feminist scholars have sharply critiqued the novel for sidelining Dolores Hayes, arguing that she is often reduced to a mere prop for Humbert's desires. Andrea Dworkin famously asserted that the girl is used to serve the man's perverse subjectivity, while critics like Susan Gubar have contended that Nabokov intentionally exposes this imbalance, constructing Humbert as a critique of both reader complicity and patriarchal narrative control. A persistent misreading, especially after film adaptations, is the glamorization of Lolita as a seductress, a distortion that has entered popular culture and language. This interpretation is deeply at odds with Nabokov's intent. He was disturbed by the mythologizing of Lolita as anything other than a victim. As Nabokov himself stated, "There is no Lolita, she only exists through Humbert's fantasy." Since its release, Lolita has remained a lightning rod for debate. Critics have accused Nabokov of inviting reader sympathy for Humbert or glamorizing abuse, while the author insisted the novel is a tragedy and a cautionary tale, not a love story. The book's cultural afterlife, through misreadings, adaptations, and translations, has often further muddied its meaning, sometimes downplaying Humbert's culpability or erasing Lolita's suffering. At its core, Lolita is a complex, multi-layered work that challenges readers to confront the power of narrative, the dangers of unreliable narration, and the ethical responsibilities of both authors and audiences. The controversy and misinterpretation surrounding the novel underscore the very themes Nabokov sought to explore: the manipulation of perception, the erasure of victims, and the seductive, sometimes dangerous power of art. Lolita is widely regarded as one of the greatest novels of the 20th century, profoundly shaping postmodern literature and popularizing the unreliable narrator as a literary archetype. Its influence is seen in the works of authors such as Martin Amis, Ian McEwan, and Jeffrey Eugenides. The novel's innovative narrative techniques, unreliable narration, intertextuality, and metafiction have become foundational elements of contemporary fiction. Beyond its literary achievements, Lolita is studied across disciplines including literary studies, gender studies, and legal ethics, due to its formal daring and persistent moral ambiguity. The book has sparked ongoing debates about censorship, the ethics of representation, and the responsibilities of writers and readers, continually provoking and educating audiences. Film adaptations, notably Stanley Kubrick's 1962 version and Adrian Lyne's 1997 film, have struggled to capture the novel's complexity and the interior life of Dolores Hayes. Nabokov's broader body of work, such as Pale Fire, Ada, and Speak Memory, further explores themes of consciousness, artifice, and the elusiveness of truth, yet Lolita remains his most potent and controversial creation. Reading Lolita is like handling a knife carved from crystal, dazzling, sharp, and dangerous. Nabokov's hypnotic prose draws us into Humbert's self-deception, making us complicit in his narrative even as we're repelled by his actions. This tension between moral clarity and aesthetic complexity is where Lolita truly lives. The novel's brilliance lies in how it becomes its own obsession. Humbert tells his story so beautifully, so persuasively, that it's easy to be swept away by his version of events. But if we only admire the prose and ignore the pain beneath, we risk falling into the very trap Nabokov warns us about, mistaking artful language for truth. Over the years, Lolita has been wildly misunderstood and misrepresented, reduced to an aesthetic, romanticized in pop culture, and even mislabeled as a love story. But Lolita is not a love story. It is a cautionary tale about the weaponization of language, the distortion of truth by beauty, and the silencing of a young girl's voice, even in her own story. Nabokov didn't write this novel to celebrate desire, but to expose the delusion and danger behind it. As readers, we must approach Lolita with vigilance and empathy. We have to ask, who is telling the story? What are they leaving out? Beautiful language can be a mask, and it's our responsibility to look past seductive surfaces and confront the pain beneath. We must resist flattening this book into a pop culture symbol, and instead read it critically, with compassion for the person who matters most, Dolores Hayes, not Lolita. Dolores. Ultimately, Lolita is a masterpiece and a profound moral challenge. It refuses comfort or easy answers, rewarding deep analysis and critical engagement. Its legacy remains a testament to literature's power to provoke, disturb, and illuminate. Read Lolita, but read it warily, read it wisely.